Obito had knocked Naruko out as soon as she was in his Kamui dimension, and by the time she woke up, she was already restrained in a dark, isolated prison, with all remaining members of the Akatsuki observing her. As soon as she fully realized her predicament, Naruko opened Kurama's cage. "If you can escape, do it. Even if you have to kill me to do it, I seem to be doomed regardless."
"That is no longer an option, I'm afraid. The first thing this fake Madara did was draw new seals on top of your existing Reaper Death seal, reinforcing it. By you opening the door, I have an easier access to your mind and body than ever. Yet even with us fully cooperating, I won't be able to force but the barest sliver of my chakra through to you."
"Well, what if I could cut that part of my skin off?" Restrained as she was, even that would prove difficult to achieve.
"Flaying yourself won't be enough. The Reaper Death Seal is attached to you on a deeper level than just the physical."
"What do you mean?"
"There is more to this world than chakra. There are spirits and demons and things even I don't fully understand. This so-called Reaper that your father summoned to make this seal is one such creature. While the seal is located on your lower abdomen, a simple knife wouldn't have enough spiritual weight behind it to break it."
"Then what would have enough spiritual weight behind it?"
"I don't know. Believe me, I've spent a long time pondering ways to break seals like this, and I don't know of anything that can brute force break it like that. I'm sorry."
Naruko's attention was drawn to the discussion happening in the real world. "Now just one more thing," the masked man said to the other Akatsuki members in a way that implied he had been talking for a long time while she was unconscious. "Ah, I see you have awoken. No matter." He pulled out a kunai and slashed Naruko's cheek. It stung, but she had dealt with worse. Konan made a face. "What was that for?" "Like I said, I'm taking every possible precaution," he said, and produced a vial that he held up to the cut, applied some pressure to speed up the bleeding, and didn't stop until the vial was full. "Hidan, I want you to hold on to this." And the vial of blood exchanged hands. "It's just not the same if I don't reap the blood myself," Hidan complained. "Will it still work?" Yeah, it will work. Just not the same." "And that's all that matters. Hidan and Kakuzu will deliver enough water to keep her alive. And until her chakra levels fall low enough, we'll implement the rotation of washes. We'll prod her so she can't stay still long enough to get her nature chakra. These bindings should be strong enough to hold even a sage, but I won't take chances." It was obvious to everyone there that Tobi was done pretending that he wasn't in charge of the Akatsuki. The masked man named Hidan is the first one to keep watch over her. When everyone was gone, he chose to make conversation. "If there are any last wills or thoughts or regrets you'd like to share, I'll be more than happy to hear them," Hidan said. His tone was friendly and sympathetic, but Naruko's skill in ninju had made her an excellent judge of character. She wasn't buying it one bit. "I am a priest, and more than qualified to hear your last words." "There is something," Naruko said, but didn't elaborate yet, making a show of being reluctant to share. "Now don't be embarrassed, child. Confession is good for the soul." After waiting a few more moments, Naruko spoke up. I was never able to become a mother." That didn't look like what Hidan was expecting to hear. "I grew up an orphan. I always wanted a family of my very own, and I know the Uzumakis used to be important. When I die alone, there will be nothing of us left." Now, there's no need to be sad. All things die. That is the reason anything comes into existence. Without an ending, nothing matters. Like a story that an author never finishes. Be proud and happy of the life you have lived, of the acclaim you and your ancestors accumulated. Rejoice in the end, my child. Hidan, Naruko decided, was a very shitty priest.
"Naruko, what are you planning?"
Kurama asked. He knew her thoughts better than anyone, arguably better than Sakura even. and so he knew that Naruko never had any great desire to become a mother, start a family, or placed any particular value on her family's history. Not even worth calling this a plan. Just planting a small seed that will probably never come up, Naruko said. I'll try, Naruko said to Hidan, who nodded happily and then continued the rest of his watch exclaiming about the glory of his god Yashi. I am growing impatient, Obito said. Konan and Nagato could both tell even without being told. Even with his mask on, they could feel the nervous tension of their masked ally. Damn the Itachi. Konan, Obito and Nagato, in the form of Tendo Pain, were sitting in one of the highest buildings that could be found in the hidden rain village, in a room that was often used to conduct meetings for the leaders of the Akatsuki. You blame Itachi, not the Hokage? Pain asked. Zetsu tells us that he controls the reanimation jutsu, yet you assume Itachi works willingly. You recruited him even though you knew of his lingering loyalties to the Leaf Village, Konan guessed. It sounds like this is your failing. Obito ignored the accusatory tone. Konan's dislike of him had never been a secret. I knew, yes. We had a deal that we wouldn't attack Konoha while he served. I knew he was dying and that the QB needed to be sealed last regardless. I didn't see an issue. The El Tensei... that was something I didn't expect. There is no use in pointing fingers, Pain said. The 8 Hills is now being held by Konoha. Considering current events, I see nothing but good things coming from leveling that place to the ground. Eager, are you? Obito said. Good. However, it may not be as simple as that. Our enemies have grown powerful. Zetsu witnessed Itachi's brief scuffle with Kisame and the Raikage, and he's stronger than ever, as is Sasuke Uchiha. Put together, I suspect it will be too much for even you to handle. Are you sure? Konan asked. They would be a far greater challenge than Uzumaki, and you lost that fight. No. We must wait for an opportunity. Zetsu predicts that soon the armies of the Leaf will clash with the remains of all the other villages. When all their forces are otherwise occupied, that is when we will strike. That runs the risk of uniting them against us, Pain said. No. Despite all we've done, they actually seem to hate each other more than they hate us. Incredible, really. And do you intend to go yourself? Pain asked. None of them could see Obito's eyes narrow in suspicion behind his mask. I will tell you the plan when the time is right. And he disappeared into nothing as was his wont. Now alone, Konan said, about this new development in the war. Is it really alright for us to just stand by and do nothing? Why? Because innocent people are being harmed? It is always thusly. The best we can do is focus on completing our plan. This fourth war will cease to matter then. And you'd be okay with the Hokage obtaining your tailed beast weapon. If you just introduce it into the world, waiting for the strongest to claim it, that is what is like to happen. That had been the original idea. I had planned to give the weapon to the Ideal Seekers. They can use the weapon to unify the world, and this Danzo shall know pain. Konan shook her head, feeling a smidge of disappointment. How could he understand them so little? They won't use it. If you give it to them, they will find a way to destroy the weapon. I feared you would say that. If I'm one of the daimyos, it matters not. Even if the Hokage gets the weapon, that wouldn't go against our plans. All that matters is that whoever gets the weapon uses it to unify the world and put an end to all wars. It was the same argument as always. Yet Konan felt disquieted. She had never joined the Ideal Seekers fully, as her loyalty would always be to Nagato foremost. But she had still lived with them, gotten to know them, respect and even admired them. She knew that they would all fight to the death to avoid the future Pain's plan promised. Even if they recognized that the new world would be better, they would reject it still, since it would bring them further from the ideal they sought. It wouldn't be the unreachable utopia where everybody understood each other and didn't fight just because they were unwilling to hurt one another, not because they were incapable of hurting one another. They would all perish, and the world would be diminished because of it. Could we not... Konan paused as she had no idea how to avoid the destruction of Naruko's legacy while still continuing with her original plan. Talk some more with him? Maybe we can reason with him. Konan didn't like how unsure she sounded. She knew she was grasping at straws. After we killed our beloved leader? No. We need to focus our attention on preparing for the final stages of the plan. And he continued in a more hushed tone. And defeating Madara. You've gotten more ideas? We have always had to kowtow to Madara, as we lack the strength to challenge him. But with Uzumaki in our possession, that may no longer be true. Do you intend to ask Uzumaki to help you against Madara? Konan asked hopefully. Knowing her, she'd actually agree to that, but it seemed like too much of a risk of her escaping afterwards. Well, perhaps that wouldn't be so bad, Konan thought, and then reprimanded herself for that treacherous thought. Pain looked at Konan dubiously. Of course not. After the Nine Tails is sealed, I intend to turn Naruko's body into one of my paths. She'll make a stronger vessel than even Yahiko. Just like Sasori's puppets, the paths of pain that Nagato used were more powerful, could conduct his chakra better, the stronger the original owner of that body had been. It was why Tendo Pain was considered the strongest of the paths, not just its possession of the gravitational abilities. Yahiko had been stronger than any of the other previous owners of the paths. Naruko would eclipse even him. It will doubtlessly give us an edge. Konan felt sick. She might be willing to help us of her own volition. Surely a willing ally would be better than a puppet. Konan. To be honest, I was on the point of suggesting such a thing right before you made up your mind of capturing her. Konan, Pain repeated, a little sharper. It's too late. Even if I wanted to work with her. Which you don't, Konan thought. Naruko Uzumaki's strength is failing. For her to be of any help to us alive, she would need to recover from her imprisonment. Any attempt at such would immediately provoke the fight with Madara we both know is coming and are still ill-prepared for. Naruko Uzumaki is doomed, but she will serve this world one last time by giving her strength to me, so I can rid this world of a great threat. Konan didn't say anything back. Konan, do you still believe in the plan? I still believe in you, Konan answered, and stood up. Konan had never cared all that much about fixing the world like Yahiko and later Nagato did. She was here, to put it as simply as possible, because Nagato was her best remaining friend. It was why she had felt a kinship with Sakura, who also did what she did more because of what Naruko Uzumaki did, and believed in any personal conviction on her part. Konan found herself walking towards Uzumaki's prison. Even if it was unrealistic, she was still curious of if she would help them against Madara if given the chance. Maybe she could come up with a solution that Nagato didn't see. There were no more Akatsuki guarding her constantly. When Konan stepped into the dark metal room that held the Jinchuriki and saw her, it was clear why. Madara had decreed that Naruko was not to be given any food and only enough water to not die. She was bound to the wall in an uncomfortable position that made it impossible for her to get any sleep at night. Naruko Uzumaki was, to put it bluntly, being tortured through intentional neglect, weakening her so that even if she broke free, she'd lack the strength to fight against even the weakest of the Akatsuki. They knew Sage Mode required a strong baseline of chakra to master. It was why only the strongest ninja could even attempt to become one. So with Naruko so weakened, it would be impossible for her to use the form, as she couldn't balance her own diminished chakra with the nature chakra. Naruko's skin looked pale, and her cheeks were hollow. Where her arms and ankles were bound to the wall, her skin was broken with red-crusted bloodstains, a result of her struggling pointlessly to break free. She had also been shaved bald, and her scalp was covered with a sticky glue-like substance in order to prevent her from using her hair to try and escape. Konan grabbed a jug of water that was placed nearby, hoping it would give her a bit of strength back to talk. "Uzumaki," Konan said when she got within arm's length of her with her still not responding. Konan wondered if she was asleep somehow, despite the uncomfortable position. At the very least, she could still fall unconscious. Naruko's face snapped up to meet her, and Konan saw her eyes were red and slitted. "Ninetales," Konan guessed. "Where is Uzumaki?"
Beyond your reach, human.
"The new seals were supposed to suppress your influence. For you to talk to me, your cage must be open." She said it like a question, but the Ninetales didn't respond. "If your cage is open, Uzumaki's soul is now at your mercy. She's still in there?"
Cheers.
As of this moment, Naruko was sleeping within the seal, and Kurama was helping to counter some of the cold and discomfort that he wasn't completely able to block from her physical senses, by letting her use his fluffy tail as a cushion and partial blanket. "Let me talk to her."
No. You've done enough to her. She still wishes to struggle, but deep down she knows she can't escape. She's just hurting herself. I cannot save her, but I will give her as much peace and comfort as I am able.
"You've taken over her body," Konan said, "taking the pain and hunger of her body upon yourself so she doesn't have to suffer it."
It is the least I can do.
"But she wasn't a perfect Jinchuriki. You didn't aid her in her fight with pain."
No, I didn't. To my own shame and detriment.
"I see. Why didn't you help her?"
Why does she have to die?
Came the Ninetales' return question. "For the greater good of the world," she echoed Nagato.
Indeed. The simplest answer for why I never helped her was because I hate all humans. But why, you might wonder? I do recognize the beauty in you. Love, friendship, a desire to do good, to see yourself as heroes. It's what elevates you above animals. Yet in the thousands of years of my existence, I've seen these beautiful qualities be twisted. To protect what you love, you kill what other people love. For the sake of friendship, you go against your own conscience. In order to see yourself as heroes, you fight and so become someone's villain. And why? For the greater good, of course. And so the reason for why I hated humans, and why I didn't help Naruko, or the world for so long, should be obvious. It's because of people like you, Konan.
Konan met the Kyuubi's glare with one of her own. "Were you not willing to kill her yourself to secure your own freedom?" Konan asked. Naruko had kept her own troubled relationship with the Kyuubi a secret, and Akatsuki had, of course, been very interested in that information. "How exactly are you any better, creature?" Some of the venom seemed to disappear from Naruko's red-slitted eyes, to be replaced by a deep wariness.
I have come to realize that perhaps I am not.
Konan didn't feel any joy at getting that small verbal victory over the demon fox. How is it that the only one in this building without regrets is the girl scheduled to be executed? Konan thought. Tell Naruko that the world hasn't forgotten what she stood for, and that she'd be proud of her friends if she could see what they are doing now. And then she left. The Ninetales wasn't the only one willing to offer a doomed girl small kindnesses. Some days later, as she was walking back to her quarters, Konan was stopped by a runner. "A message from outside the village, you say?" "Yes, Angel-sama, from the new leader of the Seekers. A very messenger asked me to deliver it to you. I thought it a waste of time, but I figured it was for you or God to decide." "So it is. Give it to me." The letter was addressed to both herself and Pain, but Konan felt wise to read it first alone in the privacy of their own quarters. I address this letter to Pain and Konan, my most hated enemies. You are both beyond my grasp, both due to the difference in our abilities, as well as the promises that bind me. And so, as per usual, when one faces a foe that is beyond you, all that is left to do is to accept. Accept that all one can do is bend one's head in surrender and beg. Before you throw this away, know that I am not asking for Naruko to be spared. Believe me, I would. If I thought it would do any good, I would get on my knees and kiss the soles of your sandals, endure any humiliation, if I thought it would save her. Ask and I will come, but if not, listen to this. I want Naruko to be respected. Even if she is to be killed, I want her body to be returned so we can put her to rest. No, not we, so that I may put her to rest. A part of me fears this is a huge mistake, admitting this, but I do not care what she means to others. I find myself incapable of looking beyond my own pain. Originally, I intended to present some arguments on why respecting our body would be what is best for us all, and those are still attached to this message if you're interested, but sod it, I am not. So instead, I just want to share what she means to me. Konan, you traveled with us for a long time. You must have heard the rumors. Most of us were ninjas, soldiers. And soldiers? Well, they gossip. Especially about their leaders. They knew we were close and have overheard more than a few lewd suggestions that perhaps there was more than friendship between us. They are all blind fools. I remember the early days with her, when we were children. Naruko was a lonely child. No friends, no family. To be honest, I didn't care much for her either. She was always causing trouble, blatantly disrespectful of authority, rude, vandalism even. I wanted nothing to do with her. She was a problem, but at least she wasn't my problem. Then Ino made it my problem. That name might not mean anything to you. She died in Genin in the Chunin exams in Konoha over 3 years ago. No notable achievements to her name. But that is wrong. Neither I nor Naruko would have become the people we are today if not for her. Ino was brilliant. Not like a ninja genius, but just someone who shone. I was a shy and insecure child growing up, an easy target for bullies. And one day, Ino just took me under her wing, and the bullying stopped. I considered her my best friend ever since. Yet despite my own early isolation, I found myself completely blind to Naruko, who had it way worse than me. Ino was twice the person I was, saw. She saw how Naruko was suffering, and just like how she did with me, took her under her wing. Naruko changed so rapidly from one day to the next, I often wondered if I imagined how she was before. Where before she was brash and confrontational, now she was meek and submissive, to Ino and to me as well. We could snap our finger and Naruko would do anything we asked. I don't think we abused that, but I do remember how she would never tell us what she wanted to do. She would just trail after the two of us, a quiet shadow. Some of those kids that used to pick on her said that she was more like our pet than our friend. When Ino later tried to reassure her that of course she was our friend, I will never forget her reply. I wouldn't mind being your pet, so long as that means you will never leave me. I was 8 years old. What was I to make of something like that? Yet now looking back, I think that maybe those bullies had a point. She wasn't our pet, of course, but I think we couldn't really just call her our friend either. I think she was our child, or little sister. To Naruko at least, I think Ino and I were as close to parents as she ever got. It sounds ridiculous, yet it was so. We definitely saw it as our responsibility. Whenever we saw Naruko or heard about her when she wasn't with either of us, we again saw glimpses of the problem child she had been. It fell to us to correct her behavior, to teach her manners, how to be responsible. Ino taught her how to make other friends. Things weren't always perfect between us, though. As she slowly grew into what was looking to be the most brilliant kunoichi in history, both Ino and I grew envious of her. Ino in particular also grew envious of Naruko's new popularity. I don't remember what was said exactly, but I remember that at one point Naruko offered to stop interacting with other children, if that is what we wanted. We didn't, of course. We did always want what was best for her, yet still we looked on in envy. I suppose it is the strange nature of our relationship. Naruko was our friend. She was our pupil. She was our child. She was our sister. In time she became our idol, then our rival. First we taught her, and then she started teaching us. And when Ino died, she became my everything. And finally she became our leader, and always she was family. When I stopped being a child and saw the world with clearer eyes, she became hope that things could be better. And I am proud to have played a part in creating the greatest hero this world has ever seen. So to respond to those damn rumors, yes, Naruko is so much more than my friend. So I beg of you, please, give her back to me. Alive or dead, give her back to me. Let me look upon her and place a kiss upon her forehead one last time. There were tear stains on the paper. Please. 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 Below that were some more anecdotes written by Kiba Inuzuka. How Naruko had been the glue that held their class together after graduating, always seeking ways to keep in touch with them. Konan saw that even back then there were glimpses of the girl who believed the world could be saved through friendship and understanding. After she finished the letter, Konan pocketed it. She'd be lying if she said she wasn't touched by it. But right now her greatest desire wasn't to answer Sakura's pleas, but to give the letter to Nagato. She had to know his response. And so she made her way to where he was, his real body. And with a simple, "You should read this," gave it to him. Nagato used his gravity manipulation to levitate the paper in front of him, and Konan kept a very close eye on him as he read. As much as it pained her to see his body slump with guilt, a part of Konan couldn't help but feel hardened by it. He is still a good man. We cannot do as he asks. We need her body. You know this. Nagato asked her because it was a question. It is logical, Konan said. We have sacrificed too much already to be swayed by one girl's grief. Again he looked to her, looking for confirmation. He is trying to convince himself. He is a good man, and it's killing him. Konan thought Sakura had done a good job of pleading her case. But right now it wasn't anything she wrote that was on the older woman's mind, but what she had said to her in person over a week ago. Naruko wasn't always like this. Once she sought to kill a man that she hated. A man who might even have deserved it. Yet killing him would have been wrong. If she had killed him, her path would have been very different. I don't think she'd have left the Leaf Village. She wouldn't have tried to strive against what it means to be a shinobi, since she'd have been just like everyone else. I think I understood even then what killing that man would mean for Naruko. That it was wrong somehow. Yet I didn't speak up. I didn't try to dissuade her. Because I was loyal to her, and I wanted to support her in all things. Yet blindly following her did her no good. I think I nearly lost my friend because of it. I got very lucky. I do not think you'll be as lucky as I was. Konan liked Naruko. She liked the ideal seekers, respected them if not agreed with them fully. But seeing Nagato so troubled, she found she really didn't care about them all that much in comparison. What she cared about was the pain she saw in her best friend's eye. He wanted to do right by everyone, to bring suffering down to the lowest point human nature allowed. Yet he had to do evil to get there. And perhaps he is right, Konan thought. Perhaps in a decade or so, Nagato will be proven to be correct. With war having become impractical, more resources will be fueled into improving the lives of everyone. Child soldiers will become a thing of the past. No more countries will be decimated, families torn asunder. But Nagato wouldn't live to see any of it. All he would see was doomed rebellion after doomed rebellion trying to fight against the new status quo. Brave idealists rising up and being mercilessly cut down. Nagato wouldn't live long enough to see a new world rise from the ashes. Only more pain that was caused by him. Konan didn't care all that much about the future of this world, or high-minded ideals. She cared about the last friend she had left in this world. Nagato, do you trust me? Nagato looked at her. More than I trust myself. And I shall do my best to save you, Konan decided. Naruko wondered if Kurama would have been this open with her if they hadn't been stuck in a hopeless situation. He no longer had any reason to stick to his pride and punish her for the sins of her father and humanity as a whole.
There isn't much left to tell about the first Hokage after that. His insane cellular regeneration speed did come with the downside of shortening his own life, so he died of old age sooner than most.
At Naruko's request, as a way to pass the time, Kurama had been regaling her with stories of historical figures. As one would expect, the fox had a lot of knowledge, having lived longer than humans had recorded history, and he had witnessed the Leaf village develop from the perspective of the wives of two Kage. You no longer sounded angry with him.
Keep that smug tone out of your voice, girl. My opinion about him hasn't changed, but what purpose does anger serve me now?
What purpose has it served you ever?
Anger can keep you going when you've got nothing else left.
Well, maybe I could use some of that anger myself, Naruko mused. It was weird. She wasn't angry at her current situation, nor resentful or anything. During her fight with pain, she had come to the realization she was okay with dying. It wasn't that she had lost the will to live, but rather she knew that there was nothing she would have done differently to lead to a different result. And Konan's message implying that Sakura was alright put even that worry to rest. Naruko was, to put it bluntly, at peace. After she and Kurama had explored all their options and figured out there was really no further way to create more opportunities for escape, they had just laid down their arms, as it were. And for the next few days had just kept each other company. By now, Naruko was confident she knew him better than anyone else in recorded history, and she would honestly rate him in the top 5 people she trusted most after Sakura, Kiba and Asuma. A weird thing to say about someone that had been trying to get her killed for so many years, but there it was. If only she could undo the extra bindings that the fake mother had placed on her. Kurama had told her that combined they could level the entire Hidden Rain village by themselves. Kurama had also told her that Uzumaki's tended to be very good at sealing jutsus, but Naruko figured she must be an exception. She could make neither heads nor tails of the sealing array placed on her, and neither could Kurama, and he had decades of second-hand experience in the art by observing Mito and Kushina.
Konan has returned,
Kurama told her. Naruko hadn't been pleased last time when she learned he hadn't woken her up to deal with the older woman personally. The chance she could convince her to help her escape was minimal, but she still wanted to make the attempt. If nothing else, there was still her promise to Sakura to consider that she would never stop trying to return to her. As Naruko regained control of her body from Kurama, she immediately had to force back a hiss of pain. Her wrist and elbows felt like they were on fire from the metal binding scraping against her wounds. Konan filled the jug they used to give her enough liquid to survive and brought it to Naruko's lips. Naruko tried her best to gulp it down and immediately noticed the odd taste. This isn't water. Her own voice sounded hoarse from disuse and dryness. It's a special nutrient paste. Anything more would upset your stomach and just make you worse in the short run, Konan said, as she next began to cut away the special glue from her scalp, allowing her to regrow her hair if she so chooses. Thank you, Naruko said for what she assumed was an attempted rescue. I'm not doing it for you, Konan snapped at her and unlocked her shackles. Naruko was so weak she initially couldn't stand up without leaning on Konan for support. Can't your furry friend speed up your recovery? It already is. Would go faster if you could undo the seals on my stomach. I don't know how. Madara made them and I fear only he could undo them. Kurama had been able to tell Naruko with reasonable certainty that the masked man wasn't the real Madara, but that didn't matter right now. What about Nagato? I don't know, Konan said, and she began to lead her out of the room. He knows what I'm doing. She had told Nagato in no uncertain terms that she planned to break Naruko out of prison. Regardless of anything, she'd never go behind his back. Nagato looked pained and told her she had to do what she believed was right, and he'd do the same. That could mean anything. They managed to pass 2 corners before they encountered anybody. Tendo Pain blocked their path. Your powers of persuasion truly are remarkable, Uzumaki, to turn even Konan to your side. I haven't talked to her since my imprisonment, Naruko said. I am not doing this for her. I'm doing this for you, so you can stop hating yourself. I don't matter, Konan. What is one man's conscience against the fate of the world? To me, everything. And if I were to order you to stop? Someone once told me that blind loyalty does nobody any service. I will serve you the best way I can see, even if it goes against your wishes. Konan. And Tendo Pain lifted a hand as if to either blast them with gravity or shoot one of its chakra balls at them. Konan made no move to resist. Actively fighting Nagato would be one step too far for her. If he wanted to kill her, she'd accept that judgment. Besides, Konan's earring was made out of Nagato's chakra metal, so he could just paralyze her at will. A blast of iron shot out of Pain's hands. Konan closed her eyes, and she felt something fly over her shoulder, and then a sound of impacts right behind her. Konan looked behind her and saw Kisame with his sword raised in a guarding position. Konan jumped behind Tendo Pain with Naruko. This is idiocy, but all the same, I thank you, my friend. Nagato finished. Go. Konan guided Naruko forward while warning her that I won't be able to guide you the whole way. Nagato can handle Kisame easily, but as soon as Madara gets involved, he'll need my help. They could hear the sound of fighting behind them, and the building shook from the forces Kisame and Pain were both unleashing. And what about the others? Kakazu and Hidan will be coming after us, and I'll need to deal with them somehow. I'll help if needed. No, you don't understand. You need to... And that's when the last Akatsuki duo found them. Stop right there, Kakazu told them. Konan hoped he could be reasoned with. Kisame had been recruited personally by Madara, so she wasn't surprised he opposed them. But Kakazu had been recruited by Nagato in the guise of Pain. Where are you going with our prize? Pain has already confronted me and allowed me to pass. You owe him your allegiance. He is indeed my original employer, yet this little business venture of ours might soon be under new management. None of us are blind to the growing tension between you and the guy with the orange mask. To be honest, I don't really care about your internal squabbles. You can fight it out amongst yourselves. Then let us pass. I think I'd rather keep you here. If your Pain wins, he can tell me to stand aside. If he loses, then I'd rather stay on the new boss's good side by securing the Jinchuriki. If you're confident that Pain can win, let's just wait here and see what happens. And you don't just let a sacrifice go once she has been selected, Hidan complained. It's just not done. Konan weighed her options and eventually decided it was ultimately better not to antagonize these two. Her time would be better spent going back to help Nagato than to exhaust herself fighting an unnecessary battle. If Pain lost, she didn't care what happened to Naruko. She had spoken true when she said she wasn't doing it for her sake. Agreed. Well, screw all of you then, Naruko said as she got off of Konan's shoulder, standing on her own feet. I'm not just going to wait here to let my fate be decided for me. Do what you must, Konan said, turning to run back to where she could hear Pain fighting. Good luck. and she disappeared in a flurry of paper before Naruko could return the sentiment. Kakuzu looked at her with amusement. Do you intend to fight as in your condition? Naruko didn't answer and threw herself out of a window, dropping down from the 10-story building they were on. Regrowing her hair took some chakra, but once she had it, manipulating it didn't. It was the most cost-effective technique she had, so she used it to grab onto several metal protrusions to slow down and guide her fall, disappearing into one of the small alleys that were present in the Hidden Rain village. Once she hit the ground, she started running.
I'm speeding up your metabolism of the nutrient paste and refilling your energy as fast as I can,
Kurama told her.
The longer you remain free, the more strength you'll regain. In a few minutes you might be able to chance gathering nature chakra.
Hiding was never my specialty, but if I keep moving then I'll... Whatever else she was going to say was lost as she let loose a yell of pain, stumbled and fell forward, breaking her fall with her hands. Looking down she saw blood. Her blood, coloring her pants red. How did I get injured? Back in the building above, Kakuzu nodded in approval to Hidan. The priest of Yashin was standing in a ritual circle and had his characteristic look of black skin with white accentuating lines. Notably, he also had a retractable spear sticking out of his leg. Starting this ritual without completing it feels wrong. Whoever wins, neither Pain or Orange Face will be happy if we kill the Jinchuriki, Kakuzu said. Come, let us go put the little bird back in her cage. Kisame never had much of a chance against Pain, for many reasons. First of all, he only very recently came back from a crushing defeat at the hands of the Raikage Bee and even Itachi. That loss had forced him to regenerate most of his body, which took a significant effort even for him. So he was far from at his best. Second, it was really hard to steal chakra from Pain, as was Kisame's usual modus operandi. Most of the chakra the paths used was transmitted into them, something Samahara couldn't really do anything about. The Preta path could absorb any water that Kisame wanted to conjure up, and honestly, that was enough. Nagato didn't feel the need to bring anything more than Diva and Preta paths to this fight. Kisame was, if definitely not happy, not angry at this fact. He was as loyal to Obito as Konan was to Nagato. In case Pain and Konan tried to free Uzumaki, he was to try and stop them or die trying. So in this case, he just died trying. It was acceptable. An almighty pull pulled the Sharkman into an uncontrolled forward fall, right into a flurry of paper bombs which exploded upon impact. Samehana managed to save Kisame by completely covering him. As soon as he weathered the explosion, he continued forward towards Tendo Pain, having been told about the cooldown on his gravitational abilities. More paper bombs coalesced on his position, but he didn't care. He got in range, Samehara came down and Tendo tried to block with the metal chakra rods. They couldn't stand up to the strongest of the hidden mist swords for long, but he didn't need to. Konan's paper stabbed itself into Kisame's flesh and detonated inside of him, killing him, and also destroying the Tendo Pain. But that was nothing the Naraka path wouldn't be able to fix, assuming they got the time for that. Neither Konan nor Nagato dropped their guard after dealing with Kisame, however. He wasn't the one they were worried about. Indeed, they heard clapping and saw the masked man sitting on a pillar above them. Congratulations. My compliments on a nice finisher. Less so on your life choices. We all knew it would come to this. The rest of the Pains appeared to deal with their greatest challenge. Yes, but actually no. Yes, I knew we'd be forced to fight eventually. But I thought we would fight after we had sealed all the tailed beasts, to decide who would determine the fate of this world. Never did I imagine you'd give up on your own plans right before the finish line. By releasing Uzumaki now, you are no longer fighting for your own vision of the future over mine. You are just fighting to maintain the status quo. After everything you've been through, I confess myself surprised at this choice. The Paths of Pain's expressions were as calm as ever, but Konan could tell from her connection to Nagato through her earrings that those words bothered him. Nagato hated the status quo with a burning passion that had driven him for decades. You are wrong. We will continue trying to put the world to rights. We'll find another way. It seems you're now wearing the pants in this relationship, eh, Konan? It's a little late to be trying to play the hero now, though, isn't it? After all the deaths you've both already caused. Deaths that you are now rendering meaningless by giving up. He's trying to shake Nagato's confidence. Konan knew. Nagato's battle with Naruko had already shown that he fought less optimally if his opponent could shake his convictions. You said you trusted my judgment. Konan communicated telepathically, something her metal earrings allowed. Yes. And I trust you. If nothing else, let's believe in that. I trust that in time you can do enough good to balance the scales. And you can trust I wouldn't have pulled us out of our original plan if I didn't know it would end poorly. It will have to do, Nagato responded. He didn't sound wholly convinced, which Konan supposed was fair. She was also trying to sound a lot surer of herself than she actually was. The longer they talked, the more Madara would get under their skin, so Konan decided that the best thing to do was just to attack and get things started. Paper shurikens were launched. Madara just sat still and let them pass through him harmlessly. Meanwhile, the Naraka path went to revive the Diva path. Madara didn't seem inclined to allow that though. He jumped from his platform towards the Naraka path, facing through all the attacks that Konan and the Azura path could throw at him. When he reached the Naraka path, he pulled it into the Kamui dimension. Obito was very familiar with all of Pain's abilities and knew perfectly well in what order they had to be taken out. With Naraka removed and Kisame having already taken out the Diva path, Pain would be less than half as dangerous. In the Kamui dimension, Obito jumped upwards, made hand signs and launched a powerful stream of fire at the Naraka path. The path presented a small smile though, and started to make hand signs itself. Summoning Jutsu. What? Obito's eyes widened. And then the other 5 paths appeared in the Kamui dimension, and the Preda path absorbed the fire jutsu. Then the Azura path launched missiles at him, while what he previously assumed was the Anal path started to revive the Diva path. Obito tried to avoid the Azura path's attacks, but when he phased out to appear in the real world, Konan was there to attack him from that dimension as well. To stay in the real world would be to be ripped to shreds by a whirlwind of sharp paper. His main methods of avoiding blows halted, Obito took the missile from the Azura path right in his face, cracking his mask. He was sent flying across several pillars in the Kamui dimension before coming to a halt. You bastards. You switched your paths around, didn't you? I see through your jutsu. The now revived Tendo Pain said. As you said, we both saw this fight coming. I've had a lot of time to think about how to deal with you. I figured out how you avoid all attacks and that we'd need to attack you from 2 dimensions to have a chance at killing you. So I turned my Naraka path into the animal path, knowing you tried to remove it from the battle first. With it, I could summon all the reinforcements to this dimension that I needed. Obito had never imagined that Konan or Nagato could find a way to circumvent his Kamui. It seems I underestimated you. I got lucky indeed. Lucky? Yes. If you had decided to continue with your plans, fought me with all the conviction I saw in you so many years ago, the conviction to change a world not worth living in, I think I might have been in real trouble. Obito stood back up. But you see, no matter how clever your strategy, I have nothing to fear from a man who has already given up. Obito dashed forward with a speed he had thus far not shown. Not quite on the level of Sage Naruko, but close. Pain wasn't caught by surprise and tried to defend with Shinra Tensei. Obito phased into the true world where he now had to deal with Konan's paper bombs. Obito had already been making hand signs however, and sent spiraling waves of fire to destroy most of the bombs. Konan adjusted her attack to go around those fires and detonate them sooner, but when she did, Obito phased back into his own realm, now standing amidst the pains. Diva, Asura, Human and Pritapath all turned on him at once, but Obito slammed his hand onto the ground and thorny wooden spikes sprouted from lifeless rock to slam against the paths. Even as they were pushed away, Azura managed to land several explosives on Obito. The injuries gave them enough pause for the animal and Naraka paths to summon the damaged other 4 and restore them. Obito growled and just seemed to grow more determined. You have often made claims to godhood, Nagato. And Obito placed his hands onto the ground again, on one of the many pillars that made up his dimension. Now let me show you, that while you falsely claim to be the god of our shared world, I truly am the god of mine. And both Obito and the pillar disappears. They reappeared far away into the air, to where Nagato's real body was. I am invading. Obito kicked a pillar at the room where Nagato was in, like a giant missile. Nagato's real body could channel the power of the Rinnegan better than any of the paths, however, which saved him. But it still destroyed the room he was in, distracting him. So when Obito faced back into the Kami dimension to attack the paths, they operated with less efficiency. The animal path flooded the dimension with a horde of ferocious beasts, yet Obito faced through them all. Yes, this meant he was vulnerable in the true world, but so long as he materialized somewhere Konan or Nagato's real body weren't, he was safe. This was very different to how Obito normally used his abilities. Usually, when he faced back and forth between worlds, the point he materialized between them stayed constant. But it didn't need to be. He could materialize wherever he wanted. Doing so took a lot more effort and concentration, and thusly tended to be a bit slower, but he could do it. Obito engaged the Diva Path in Taijutsu, and they were about evenly matched. When the pains brought their numerical advantage to bear, Obito shifted dimensions again. He appeared close to Nagato's sick body again, but Konan seemed to have predicted that. So when Obito sent thorny wooden trunks at him, it was stopped by a whirlwind of swirling paper. The paper didn't let up and seemed to coalesce into the shape of a huge man with angelic-like wings and a sharp spear, like a Susanoo made of paper. Where the creature's eyes were shown two large Rinnegans. The construct was a result of Nagato sending his own chakra into Konan through her earrings, allowing them to combine their jutsus and power. Now Nagato's sickly, vulnerable body was protected within the large construct. The creature flew forward and stabbed with its spear. The paths were prepared to attack as soon as Obito would face back, but he didn't. Instead he yelled in challenge, stretched out his hands and sent wooden spikes to meet the spear. The attacks collided and Obito was sent flying. That was what he wanted, however, and he disappeared into one of the buildings, allowing him to catch his breath and plan his next move. Nagato didn't feel like allowing his enemy the chance to recuperate though. The angelic paper construct flew high in the sky. Almighty Posh! And so Nagato leveled a good chunk of his own hidden rain village. Before coming to help, Konan had sent messages to their own rank-and-file rain ninja, telling them to evacuate. Causing so much destruction to their own village was regrettable, but this wasn't the kind of opponent where they could afford to hold back. Obito was again forced to face into the Kami dimension, where he immediately got attacked by the Rinnegan summons. After 2 more times of phasing between worlds, Nagato again located the point where Obito would reflexively materialize if he didn't have the time to fine-tune his destination. When he did, he managed to skewer the man with a huge paper spear. For a moment, Nagato thought they had him, but then Obito's body disappeared. Nagato and Konan were both ninjas and knew the value of information. They still had a few spies in the Ideal Seekers, and so through them, knew of Sasuke's battle with Danzo as Hinata had told them the tale. And so they recognized the same cheating of death trick that the Hokage used. Neither of them were caught by surprise. When Obito appeared again in the Kami dimension looking none the worse for wear, their suspicions were confirmed. In the real world, a small blob of paper separated from the paper Susanoo to race towards some unknown location. After using Izanagi, Obito had returned to his hideout to grab another Sharingan to replace the one he lost using the technique. He had several. Danzo wasn't the only one who had been doing some collecting after the Uchiha massacre. Obito fought extremely recklessly from then on, knowing he could replace his spare Sharingan after every death. Not that he died a lot. He had switched his anchor to his own personal hideout. So with no danger on the other side, he was free to use Kami to its fullest potential again. With it, he was able to at last take out the Naraka path by slamming his hands onto its chest, sending wooden thorns to rip it apart from the inside out. His recklessness allowed the Azura path to skewer him with blades, but Izanagi undid all the damage again. In the real world, as in our non-anime reality, an eye transplant takes an incredibly difficult operation. Full eye transplants aren't even a thing yet. In the world of Naruto, it takes an empty eye socket and it takes seconds. It was a scramble for the 5 remaining paths to hold on after that, knowing they couldn't be easily brought back anymore. That was until Konan's paper clone arrived at Obito's hideout and proceeded to blow it up just as he materialized there, forcing Obito to use Izanagi one last time as well as destroy all the remaining Sharingans still kept in storage there. Again, Nagato and Konan had learned about that location from the information Hinata relayed to the Ideal Seekers. Obito's hideout was the same one he had brought Sasuke and Hinata to after their battle with Itachi. Hinata hadn't seen any Sharingans lying around, so they couldn't be sure. but it was the only secret hideout of Obito that the Rain Orphans knew about. With the Naraka path taken out of the picture, Nagato lost his easy method of recovery. With the destruction of the Sharingans, the same was true for Obito. Any losses would now be permanent. "You seem frustrated, old friend," Nagato said through the Diva path. "Does the uncertainty of your victory frighten you so?" The answer to that question was yes, though frightened was perhaps not the right word. Obito's one remaining Sharingan was spinning madly, and he clutched his face, looking on the verge of a mental breakdown. Nagato had meant to unsettle his enemy, and he had succeeded in that. But Obito was a user of the Mangekyo Sharingan, and Uchiha that possessed those grew stronger with negative emotions. The same was true for Sasuke in canon. Obito's obsession and desperation to complete the Eyes of the Moon plan definitely qualified. "You have no right," Obito snarled. Nagato could see Obito's chakra grow both more intense and erratic. It gave the impression of a starved and rabid animal being denied. "You, who have given up on the future, have no right!" He shot forward, now fully matching the speed of Sage Naruko. He made hand signs and a small thorny forest of tree trunks charged with him. The almighty push stopped his advance, but the wood-style attack had deliberately been a few seconds behind, so it wasn't stopped. Rinnegan summons that the animal path called forth were skewered and barely slowed the wood-style down. It wasn't quite on the scale of Hashirama's wood-style, but closer than it had any right to be. It was something that was only possible because Kamui was literally Obito's realm, and so more malleable to his impromptu attempt at terraforming. The Kamui dimension was slowly coming to resemble Maleficent's cursed forest from Sleeping Beauty with its thorny branches everywhere. Then, Nagato had the idea of trying to absorb it all with the Preda path, since it was all created by chakra. When it placed its hand on the wood, however, Obito set it all on fire. This wasn't that dangerous to any of the paths by itself, but it filled the realm with smoke, obscuring the vision of all the paths. Obito's vision was also obscured, but he knew this place like the palm of his hand, and so could navigate it blind. He didn't know where any of the paths were except one. The Preda path due to tracing the connection from where it was absorbing his wood style. Appearing from behind it, Obito decapitated it with a small Tanto source. "You will not stop me. I will burn this whole world to the ground if that's what it takes." The still burning area, and Obito with his glowing Sharingan standing amidst of it, looking like he belonged in this hellscape. It was the most evil looking thing Nagato had ever witnessed. One would think that Hidan injuring Naruko's legs would slow her down, but you'd be wrong. The first jutsus Naruko had ever developed all relied on her hair, and it was the first tool she reached for when she was in trouble. Even if all of her limbs were to be shredded, she could use her hair to maneuver around, either by pulling herself from place to place or even outright use her hair as limbs like some weird spider. The problem wasn't her maneuverability, but the fact she couldn't not leave a trail of blood behind her. Whenever Kurama healed one stab wound, Hidan would just give her another, and another, and another, and there was no way for Naruko to defend herself from it, besides taking her blood back from him. And she could only guess that would stop him, as she didn't know how his jutsu worked. But that would require fighting both Hidan and Kakuzu in her incredibly weakened state. With Kurama cooperating as he was, her regenerative factor was so great all these wounds weren't really slowing her down. She could endure, but again the trail of blood was the issue. Running was impossible, hiding was unlikely to work, and Naruko wasn't even willing to try. Stalling would just leave her fate up in the hands of the fake Madara, Pain and Konan. She wasn't willing to chance that. That left only one option. Fight. She'd probably lose any fair fight in her current condition, but if she could just get the drop on them. Naruko doubled back on her trail of blood to hide in the upper floor of a nearby building. This one, like many of the buildings she had found, were empty. Naruko's normal chakra reserves were so massive even non-sensory types could sometimes detect her presence. But that wasn't a problem in her current exhausted state. Naruko managed to pull just enough nature chakra from the environment to sense when her targets passed below her. Activating Sage mode in her condition was extremely dangerous, but she hoped not to need it. Naruko didn't rely on speed. She found some sturdy anchors for her hair, and then slowly lowered herself until she, and a clone she made, were right on top of her two enemies, all completely silent, for once acting the part of a stereotypical ninja. Rasengans made too much noise, so she channeled wind chakra through her fingernails and jabbed forward through both Hidan and Kakuzu's hearts. This did not stop them, and Kakuzu turned around and punched Naruko across her jaw, sending her flying through the building she had previously been hiding in. She maintained enough presence of mind to use the collapsing walls as cover to hide again, but again she left behind a trail of blood that would make her easy to find for any half-decent tracker, which Kakuzu most certainly was. Her clone had also been destroyed with a jab of Hidan's spear. "And still you are moving," Kakuzu said. "Starved for a week, no sleep, several stab wounds through your legs, now a punch that would destroy the jaw of any normal human. But some endurance you've got, woman. I've only seen its like once before." There was little point in staying quiet behind the partially collapsed wall she was hiding behind. Kakuzu seemed to be speaking directly at her location. He clearly knew where she was. "Some ancestor of mine?" Naruko guessed. "Uzumaki's used to be pretty badass from what I heard." "No, not an ancestor. His lineage is well documented and has been extinguished by now. I'm speaking of the first Hokage. Your regenerative abilities remind me of that man is all." "You don't look that old." "I assure you I am. I fought the first Hokage and lived. Not many can boast that feat."
Ridiculous.
Kurama scoffed inside Naruko's head.
If he fought Hashirama and lived, he must have just pity spared him.
"How are you two moving with your hearts crushed?" Naruko asked. He seemed to be in a talkative mood, so maybe. Kakuzu scoffed. "I'm not incompetent enough to..." "It is a gift bestowed upon those who follow the way of Yashin," Hidan boasted. Kakuzu turned and glared at Hidan. Though he hadn't actually given Naruko any useful information, it was the principle of the matter. "Regardless, shall we wait here until the other battle has been decided, or do you wish to continue your flailing?" Naruko's answer came in the form of several razor-sharp tendrils of her hair coming to skewer the immortal duo. Hidan jumped back to have some distance, but Kakuzu just stood still and activated his Earth Release Urge Spear, making his body even more durable. Even with wind chakra coursing through it, Naruko's hair was unable to pierce his skin. Kakuzu made a different set of hand signs, and Naruko knew enough to recognize the sequence for a fire-style jutsu. Fire-style cranium carver. A blast of fire traveled across the ground towards the wall Naruko was using as cover. Instead of retreating, Naruko used her hair to grab parts of the terrain to her side and catapult her forward towards Kakuzu. She moved so fast the flames under her did no more than singe her. When the fire jutsu made contact with the wall, it exploded into a huge inferno, but Naruko was already too far away. Naruko raised a hand. "Rasengan!" But before she could bring her attack down on Kakuzu, Hidan, who had redrawn his ritual circle, stabbed himself through the arm. Naruko gritted her teeth to stop herself from screaming, but the Rasengan exploded in her hand, injuring her wounded arm even further. Kakuzu took advantage of her weakness in close proximity to grab her throat and held her up with one hand. With the other, he ripped the sleeves of her arm off and inspected the new stab wound Hidan had inflicted, as well as the burns on her palm from the failed jutsu. It has already started to heal. Truly remarkable. Kakuzu looked at her with a clinical curiosity, like someone studying medical jutsus about to dissect an already dead pig. He slammed her down on the ground, still pinned by her throat. "If I'm right about you, you should survive this." And next the skin ripped apart, letting loose black threads that came right at her, and she was still helpless to respond with all her limbs having multiple lacerations courtesy of Hidan. Naruko had been in a lot of fights, taken a lot of injuries, painful injuries, but nothing could compare to the feeling of Kakuzu's black threads sinking beneath her chest, sewing her flesh, cracking and pushing her bones apart, grasping her heart, an organ that surprisingly had a lot of nerves around it, like the nerves of one's teeth directly being touched, except way worse. Every second she thought the pain couldn't get any more unbearable, it did. Until finally, with a gush of blood and a soul-piercing scream from Naruko, her heart was ripped out of her. It was a testament to the kind of will Naruko had that she was still conscious and could form somewhat coherent thoughts. Naruko was then treated to the sight of Kakuzu kneeling before her and presenting her own still beating heart to her. Her heart that was now being kept alive by his earth grudge, the same as all his other hearts. Such a powerful heart. My wind release will be unmatched. Kakuzu paused and gave her open-chested a look. I am sure you are wondering, wasn't he ordered not to kill her? Do not worry. I have seen your kind of regeneration before, and even this won't be enough to kill you. Even now I can see your body trying to regrow a new heart from scratch.
Naruko,
Kurama said, and Naruko could hear the sorrow in his voice.
We have lost. I can keep you alive, but you won't be fighting or fleeing anymore.
I just had an amazing idea for a new business, Kakuzu said. You've obviously got a very strong, high-quality body that regenerates. I could just keep ripping organs out of you. They would fetch a nice price on the black market. The boss will not suffer you to live for much longer. A few more weeks at most, but I could farm you for quite a bit until then.
Naruko, what he doesn't know is that this level of regeneration takes a lot of effort for me to maintain. I could just stop. You die in seconds from this position. We deny that fake Madara his victory. It may be the best we can do. I am sorry.
No, Naruko whispered through bloodied lips. I won't give up. Hidan was laughing hysterically in the background. He felt all the pain Naruko felt, but through his insanity it registered as pure pleasure. Kakuzu frowned. I hate pointless things. You've lost. Just accept it with dignity, stop wasting time and let me farm you. A line from Jiraiya's book came to her. You give up. Are making me give up. Kakuzu just sighed in annoyance. Naruko could feel the black threads crawling beneath her skin, looking for more lucrative organs to safely harvest. Naruko's eyes flickered to Hidan. I won't give up, because I've something worth fighting for. Inside Naruko's mind, Kurama was confused. He was intimately aware with Naruko's thoughts, and so her words, to him, registered as a lie. And what might that be? Hidan asked, his cheeks flushed with joy. A dream, of course. I'll never stop fighting for it. Never. Hidan laughed. Good. Good. You're like a dish that keeps on getting more flavorful the longer you stew. Physical pain is always nice, but nothing beats the raw despair of lost dreams. And Hidan lifted his spear and placed its tip right above his abdomen. The place where, if he was female, the womb would be located. Picture your future children, woman. Let this be me harvesting them for Yashin. Kakuzu's eyes widened and he opened his mouth to shout, but it was too late. The spear started to pierce Hidan's skin, and so too did Naruko's skin part. And while yes, below that skin were her reproductive organs, the skin that was currently being parted by an attack that was very much spiritual in nature, and carried all the weight of a powerful mystical entity that Swallowtail forgot, that skin was where Naruko's now reinforced Reaper Death Seal was located. In her mindscape, Naruko had raised her fist towards Kurama, even before the spear came down. Now! And Kurama bumped his own massive fist against hers just as the seal broke, and then everything changed. Naruko's body exploded with a golden light. Chakra more powerful and plentiful than anybody present had ever seen began to swirl around her in a circle. Kakuzu, who had been close by, was blown backwards due to the force of it. The black tendrils that had been invading Naruko's body disintegrated. The entire hidden rain village was shaking, and a pillar of light and chakra that could be seen for miles shot into the air. The battle between Obito and the Rain Orphans was briefly put on hold as they beheld the spectacle. After destroying the Preta path, Obito had managed to tap the summoner path and shifted him over to the real world. thusly removing Nagato's ability to move stuff between their dimensions. Then he had methodically begun to do the same thing to the summons themselves, the things that were the least able to defend against him. Nagato had attempted another large-scale almighty push, this time launched from both the Diva Path as well as the paper construct that held his real body. Obito couldn't dodge and took the hit, but the man didn't slow down, though he was visibly injured, with his clothes ripped and blood dripping from his wounds. Obito wasn't even really registering any pain through his insane desperation to win this fight. Next, he was able to exploit the slightly larger cooldown of such a large-scale Shinra Tensei to banish the Diva Path from his Kamui dimension. From there, it wasn't that difficult to do the same to the Azura and human paths. And from that moment on, he had won. The battle continued, but there was no longer any chance of him losing. Obito could now use Kamui like he always had, by shifting to a dimension where he wasn't threatened. And that was when the Reaper Death Seal broke and they saw the explosion of chakra. It's one thing after another, Obito muttered, staring at the Pillar of Light and then back to Nagato and Konan. I am running out of time, he knew. And he shot forward, phasing through everything the Paths of Pain could throw at him, through the paper construct, and then slamming his palm into Nagato's face. The two of them burst through the back of the Susanoo-like paper construct's head, causing the creation to collapse. Hidan and Kakuzu both stood rooted in place due to some primal instinct. Both of them had seen the power of a tailed beast before, as they had captured the two in Seven Tails. But those powers weren't anywhere near the same scale as this. Out of the Pillar of Light, a giant hand made of yellow chakra shot towards Kakuzu. He dodged out of the way, but only because he wasn't the actual target, but what he was carrying. The hand closed around a heart Kakuzu had ripped out of Naruko, and pulled it into the Pillar of Light. Kurama could regrow a heart, but it was easier just to take the original one back. From Naruko's perspective, she felt all of her exhaustion and pain evaporate like morning dew on a hot summer's day, mind and body alive with energy, leaving only a faint hunger as any sign of previous torture. You are not this strong, Naruko thought with awe. She had fought Kurama before in the Seal, and while immense, his power wasn't anywhere near the power he was currently giving her. Because this is not my power, it is ours. It was all of Kurama's might combined with Naruko's own strength and will, all channeled through her much smaller body. Like water suddenly flowing through a much smaller river would pick up speed. The Pillar of Light vanished, leaving Naruko standing in the middle in her new chakra cloak. Her body still shone with power like fire from an ethereal flame, and with the Tomoe markings and lines across her golden form, she truly looked like some kind of deity. With her two ponytails flowing upwards, it gave the impression that she was naturally pulled towards the heavens, and she had to will herself to remain on the ground with ordinary mortals. Hidan especially couldn't help but see her as some kind of challenge to his own god. He tried to stab himself through the brain, uncaring of the command not to kill her, but Naruko moved faster than any of them could follow. She pushed Hidan out of his ritual circle, and finished him with her Rasengan. She didn't hit him with her Rasengan so much as she created a Rasengan in the space he happened to be in. Hidan's form disappeared in the golden sphere of violently spilling energy, and when Naruko released the technique, there was nothing left of him. With the only one of the duo that had any ability to harm her taken out of the picture, she began to walk towards where she could sense Nagato pain and the fake Madara. Kakuzu had been frozen with fear up until now, but when she seemed to have no intention to deal with him, he spoke. You're just going to leave? Naruko tilted her head to look back at him. Even without this power, I'd have taken you easily if I hadn't already been half dead when we began. You are irrelevant. Go hide in some remote corner of the world. Centuries from now, when I am gone and my name has faded into legend, you can come out of hiding and once again claim that you survived a fight against me. And she averted her gaze from him. Kakuzu wasn't seeing Naruko at that moment, but Hashirama, again treating him like he was nothing, not even worth killing. It had stung at his pride then, but it was even worse now, years later after he had grown stronger and learned. Yet nothing seemed to have changed. And so Kakuzu did the dumbest thing he could do at that moment and attacked, wanting to force Naruko to acknowledge him. She didn't. Not pausing her stride towards the other battlefield, not even turning to look at Kakuzu again, she did nothing but let a giant hand of chakra explode from her back, slamming a massive Rasengan into Kakuzu, destroying all of his remaining hearts and killing him. Controlling the extra limbs of chakra that this form allowed was second nature to her, as it was so very similar to controlling her hair. She was still just controlling multiple extra appendages to use as weapons. Naruko wouldn't learn until later that she had just avenged Fu. Naruko disappeared in a flash of light, not through teleporting but too fast for most ninjas to perceive. She appeared standing over Nagato. The no longer masked man faced through the attack she had casually launched. He jumped back and glared at her hatefully, two rippled eyes held in his hand. Naruko looked down at the prone form of Nagato and noticed that he had his eyes gouged out. You are too late, Uzumaki. When next you see me, not even a fully realized Nine-Tails Jinchuriki will be able to stand against me. And he disappeared in the swirl of Kamui. We must go after him, Konan said after she had shaken off her awe at Naruko's new appearance and made sure Nagato's life wasn't in immediate danger. Konan still looked mostly fine besides some scratches and being obviously tired. He's wounded and exhausted now. We can't let him regain his strength. What Konan didn't say was that she had no clue how they were supposed to find or follow him. No, that man can wait. Naruko turned her gaze to the east. First, I have a promise to keep. And that's the end of part 42. Nikes out.